The seat that wasn't his. You don't belong in first class. The words hit the cabin like a dropped glass, and every head turned at once. Seat 2A is mine, the man by the window said quietly, without looking up. Not for long, the flight attendant snapped back. Security is 2 minutes from this jet bridge, and you are going to be on the wrong side of that door. You're about to destroy your own career, he said, still calm. Still. Then get off my plane, she said louder now, loud enough that the galley curtain trembled. Captain, I need you in first class. Right now. And somewhere behind the cockpit door, a man was about to walk into the biggest mistake of his professional life. My name doesn't matter here. What matters is what happened on Meridian Sky, Flight 1192, Chicago to Denver, on a gray Tuesday morning that started like 1,000 other mornings and ended up changing an entire airline. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to see exactly how it started, so you understand exactly how it ended. Marcus Reed had boarded early, the way he always did. Dark suit, no tie, a leather briefcase resting on his knees like it held something more important than laptops and paperwork, which, as it turned out, it did. He took seat 2A by the window, folded his hands, and did what he always did before a flight. He watched people. He watched the businessman in 2C order a sparkling water before the seatbelt sign even came on. He watched the elderly couple in row 1 struggling with an overhead bag until a junior flight attendant quietly stepped in to help. He watched the world the way a man watches something he built with his own hands, but rarely gets to see from the inside. Because Marcus Reed was not just a passenger. He was the chairman of Meridian Sky Holdings, and almost nobody on that plane knew it. He liked it that way. Flying anonymously was the only way he ever got the truth. Executives don't get the truth. They get performances. But a man in a plain suit sitting quietly in 2A. He got to see his airline exactly as it was, not exactly as people wanted him to believe it was. He was about to get an education he never asked for. Diane Coleman had been working first-class cabins for 14 years. She was good at her job. Sharp, fast, unbothered by turbulence or difficult passengers or spilled champagne 2 minutes before landing. She had a system. She had instincts. And on that Tuesday morning, those instincts told her something was wrong with the man in 2A. She couldn't have told you exactly why. That was the dangerous part. It wasn't one thing. It was a feeling built out of 14 years of assumptions stacked on top of each other until they hardened into something she mistook for professional judgment. She approached him during boarding, tablet in hand, polite smile stretched tight. "Sir, can I see your boarding pass again?" Marcus handed it to her without a word. She scanned it. It matched. Seat 2A. First class. Confirmed. "Everything's in order," she said, though something in her voice suggested she didn't quite believe her own sentence. He thought that would be the end of it. It was not. 20 minutes later, somewhere over Iowa on the ground, before the plane had even pushed back from the gate, Diane returned. This time there was no smile. "Sir, I need you to step out of your seat for a moment." Marcus looked up, calm. "Is there a problem?" "I need to verify your ticket with a supervisor. You already verified it. Twice. I need to verify it again." A woman across the aisle lowered her magazine. A retired couple 2 rows back leaned toward each other, the universal signal of people who smell a story forming. Somewhere behind them, a phone was already rising. Marcus kept his voice level. "I paid for this seat. I've shown you my documents. I haven't raised my voice. I haven't caused a delay, and I haven't done anything except sit here quietly." "That's exactly what makes me uncomfortable," Diane said. The cabin went dead silent. Even she seemed to hear how that sounded the moment it left her mouth. But instead of pulling it back, she doubled down, the way people do when they've said something ugly out loud and can't stand the idea of being wrong in front of an audience. "People fake tickets all the time," she said. "People fake IDs. People fake everything these days. Do they usually fake the confirmation email, the boarding pass, and the seat assignment all at once? Marcus asked. A young man in 2C smothered a laugh and immediately looked away. Diane's cheeks went red. Sir, I am not going to be spoken to like this on my own aircraft. It's not your aircraft, Marcus said quietly. It's a commercial flight, and I'm a paying passenger sitting exactly where I'm supposed to be sitting. That sentence would end up traveling farther than either of them could have imagined. His phone buzzed once on the tray table. A message lit the screen for half a second before he flipped it face down. Legal affairs. We're standing by. Say the word. Diane caught the glow, caught the flip. Who are you texting? Someone who actually listens before jumping to conclusions, Marcus said. That landed harder than anything else he'd said. Because it wasn't an insult. It was an observation. And observations sting worse than insults, because you can't argue with them. The cockpit door opened. Captain Daniel Ashford stepped into the aisle. Tall, gray at the temples, the kind of authority that comes from 28 years of making fast decisions under pressure and rarely being questioned about them. What's going on here? He asked, scanning the cabin like a man assessing a threat that hadn't fully revealed itself yet. Captain, this passenger is refusing to cooperate, Diane said quickly. He won't properly verify his identity, and I don't believe he belongs in this cabin. Marcus said nothing. He simply held out his boarding pass again. Captain Ashford took it, read it, matched the name, matched the seat. For one brief second, doubt flickered across his face. The look of a man realizing the paperwork didn't support the story he was being told. Diane saw that flicker and panicked in the worst possible way. She leaned in and whispered. Except it wasn't really a whisper, because half the cabin heard every word. Captain, look at him. Really look at him. Does he seem like someone who belongs up here? The cabin went so quiet you could hear the hum of the auxiliary power unit beneath the floor. A phone camera clicked. Somewhere in row 3, a young woman named Maya Bennett, 24 years old, flying to Denver to be with her mother after surgery. A woman who had never once in her life wanted to be the center of a viral moment, lifted her phone and pressed record. She didn't know yet that this single decision would end 2 careers and change an entire company. She just knew that something wrong was happening in front of her. And for once in her life, she wasn't going to look away. Marcus stood up, slowly. No aggression in it, just the unhurried movement of a man who had decided the moment for silence had passed. He was taller than Diane had assumed when he was sitting. Older, too. His eyes carried the particular weight of someone who had spent decades walking into rooms where people quietly wondered if he belonged there, and had learned, a long time ago, exactly how to answer that question without raising his voice. He straightened his jacket. "My name is Marcus Reed," he said, loud enough now for the whole cabin to hear. "I am sitting in the seat I purchased. I have shown identification twice. I have not raised my voice. I have not threatened anyone, and I have followed every single instruction given to me on this aircraft." He looked from Diane to the captain. "So someone is going to tell me, right now, exactly what I have done wrong." Nobody answered. Outside the window, a baggage cart rolled past under flat gray light, completely indifferent to the storm building inside the metal tube it was circling. Cathad. Captain Ashford looked down at the boarding pass one more time, as if the letters might rearrange themselves if he stared hard enough. They didn't. Seat 2A, paid in full, confirmed 31 days ago. The facts were clean, the room was not. Diane's arms were crossed so tight across her chest that her knuckles had gone pale. She could feel the phones. Every raised screen made her more desperate to be right, because being wrong in front of an audience felt, in that moment, worse than almost anything else in the world. "Captain," she said, voice dropping but not nearly low enough. "People forge documents constantly. You know that."
Do they usually forge the airline's own confirmation system too?
Marcus asked. An older woman in pearls, seated in row 2, glanced at Diane with something that had shifted from curiosity into open disapproval. Captain Ashford raised one hand. Everyone, stay calm. But calm had already left the building, or, more accurately, calm had already left the aircraft, and it was not coming back on its own. Maya kept filming. Her live stream, which had started with a small caption, "Something is wrong in first class," had ballooned past 400 viewers in under 3 minutes. Comments scrolled faster than she could read them. Show us his ID. Why is Hai the one being questioned? This is exactly what people mean when they say, "This happens every day." Diane spotted the phone. "Ma'am, you need to stop recording crew procedures immediately." Maya's hands shook, but her thumb didn't move. I'm not interfering with anything. I'm sitting in my seat." "This is a private aircraft cabin," Diane snapped. "No," Marcus said, quiet as a closing door. "It's a commercial flight." 2 words. Simple correction, devastating anyway. Captain Ashford felt the balance of the entire situation tilting under him, and 30 years of instinct told him the only way out was to reassert control fast, before the delay clock started costing the airline real money and real headlines. "Mr. Reed," he said, "I'm going to need additional identification." "You may ask," Marcus said. "I'll answer. But understand, I am answering because I choose to, not because you have any actual reason to ask." He reached slowly into his jacket. 2 passengers nearby visibly tensed. Captain Ashford's hand twitched toward his radio before he caught himself, and hated that he'd done it the moment he noticed. Marcus saw it too. He said nothing. The silence had more weight than any accusation could have carried. He pulled out a slim leather wallet, a driver's license, an airline loyalty card, Meridian Sky, Chairman's Circle, a tier that did not officially exist on any public fare chart, a black metal credit card that caught the cabin light when it turned. Captain Ashford's eyes moved from the license to the loyalty card and stopped there for a beat too long. "Chairman's Circle," he read aloud, mostly to himself. "That's an internal designation," Marcus said. "You won't find it in the passenger manual. Only about 40 people in the country hold it." Diane's face had gone from red to something closer to gray. "That doesn't prove anything." "Cards can be printed." Marcus almost smiled. Almost. "Would you like to call Meridian Sky Corporate and ask them who holds employee badge number 4? Silence. "I'll wait," he said. Nobody moved to make the call. Because somewhere in the back of Captain Ashford's mind, a very old and very unwelcome thought had just crystallized. What if this man is exactly who the card says he is, and I am standing in the aisle of my own aircraft, 30 seconds from an unforgivable mistake? He handed the wallet back. "Mr. Reed, I apologize for the delay. Please take your seat. We'll be departing shortly." But Diane wasn't finished. Whether from stubborn pride, wounded ego, or simple disbelief that 14 years of instinct could be this wrong, she took one more step forward. "Captain, with respect, a card doesn't change what my professional judgment is telling me. Something about this man does not sit right, and I am not going to apologize for trusting my training." The cabin let out a sound that wasn't quite a gasp, but wasn't far from it either. Marcus turned to face her fully for the first time since standing. "Miss Coleman," he said, and the use of her actual name, read off her gold badge, calm and precise, landed harder than any shout could have. "I want you to say out loud, in front of everyone recording this right now, exactly what about me does not, in your words, sit right." Diane opened her mouth. Nothing came out. "Go ahead," Marcus said. "You've said it 3 times already without saying it directly. Say it directly now." The silence stretched long enough that Maya's live chat filled with a single repeated word, over and over, faster than she could scroll. "Say it. Say it." Diane's eyes filled, not with regret yet, with the particular fury of someone who has been cornered by their own words and has no way out except through them. I don't have to explain my instincts to a passenger, she said finally, voice cracking. You don't, Marcus agreed quietly. But you're about to have to explain them to a lot of people who aren't me. He sat back down, calm, deliberate. He opened his laptop and the cabin watched, half in confusion and half in dawning horror, as a secure video call connected on his screen. A woman appeared, sharp suit, silver bob, the unmistakable posture of someone used to being the most senior person in every room she entered. Marcus, she said. What's happening? You said this was urgent. Eleanor, I need you to pull the crew roster for Flight 192 out of Chicago right now, and I need legal and HR on this call in the next 5 minutes. Eleanor Voss, general counsel and one of only 3 people who had known before this trip that Marcus Reed regularly flew anonymously to inspect his own airline, did not ask why. She simply said, "Give me 2 minutes," and the screen went to a holding slate. Diane's face had drained of color entirely now. The retired couple in row 2 exchanged a look that needed no words. The man in 2C had stopped pretending not to watch and was now filming on his own phone, angled toward Diane rather than Marcus. Captain Ashford stood frozen in the aisle, hat still in one hand, staring at a boarding pass he now understood perfectly. "Sir," he said quietly, "are you chairman of Meridian Sky Holdings?" Marcus said, not unkindly, but without softening it either. "Yes." The cockpit door behind him seemed to get very small very fast. Here is the part people always want to skip to. The moment the villain gets what's coming to her. But real accountability is slower and heavier than that, and if you stay with me, you'll understand why the ending of this story lands so much harder than a simple "she got fired" ever could. The flight was delayed 40 minutes. Ground crew boarded. A senior Meridian Sky duty manager came aboard personally, pale-faced, to confirm what Eleanor had already told him over the phone. The man in 2A owned the airline he worked for. Diane was asked to gather her things from the forward galley and wait in the terminal. She did not argue. She could not. Her hands trembled so badly that another attendant had to help her fold her cart apron. Captain Ashford was informed he would still fly the aircraft. Marcus insisted on that, actually, over the strong objection of 2 board members on the call, because grounding an experienced pilot over a single, correctable failure of judgment felt, to him, like exactly the kind of overreaction that made companies choose punishment over growth. But Ashford would be reviewed, formally, with consequences that would follow him regardless of how the flight ended. As the door finally closed and the aircraft pushed back, Maya lowered her phone for the first time in 20 minutes. Her live stream had passed 11,000 viewers. She hadn't noticed the number climbing. She'd only noticed that her hands wouldn't stop shaking, and that somewhere underneath the shaking was something that felt almost like relief. The relief of having not looked away. Now here's where the story could have ended if this were the kind of story that settles for easy justice. A villain exposed. A viral video. A satisfying gasp. Roll credits. But real consequences don't work like a highlight reel, and Marcus Reed did not build an airline by settling for easy anything. Somewhere over Nebraska, with the seatbelt sign finally off, and the cabin trying to recover some sense of normal, a junior flight attendant named Sophie Ward approached seat 2A with a coffee Marcus hadn't ordered. "I didn't say anything," she said quietly, setting the cup down. "The whole time. I stood in the galley and I didn't say a word, and I've been standing back there thinking about why." Marcus looked up at her. "Why do you think?" "Because Diane's been my lead for 2 years, and I was scared of what it would cost me to disagree with her in front of a full cabin." Sophie's voice wavered. "That's not an excuse, I know it's not." "No," Marcus agreed, "it isn't. But it's honest, and honest is a place to start." He asked her to sit for a moment, which she did nervously, perched on the edge of the jump seat across the aisle. "I'm not going to pretend. This is a small thing," he said. "A woman was humiliated today because of an assumption someone made in about 4 seconds, based on absolutely nothing except how she thought a first-class passenger was supposed to look. That's not a personality flaw. That's a system failure, and systems get built by people who stay quiet exactly the way you did. Sophie's eyes filled. "I'm not telling you this to make you feel worse," Marcus said. "I'm telling you because in about 3 months, my company is going to roll out a program that gives people like you an actual way to interrupt something like this without risking your job to do it. And I want you to help build it, because you just told me, better than any consultant could, exactly why it hasn't existed until now." By the time the plane began its descent into Denver, Eleanor Voss had assembled the beginning of what would become one of the most talked-about corporate accountability stories of the year. The video, Maya's video, all 41 raw, uncut minutes of it, had already crossed 200,000 views before wheels touched the runway. News outlets were calling Meridian Sky's press office. Hashtags were forming. And Marcus Reed, chairman of the airline at the center of all of it, spent his descent doing something almost nobody expected. He called his own legal team and refused, 3 separate times, to let them write a statement using the words "unfortunate incident" or "misunderstanding." "Say what happened," he told them, flatly. A passenger was wrongfully targeted because of how he looked, despite presenting complete and valid documentation twice. Our crew failed to meet the standard we claim to hold ourselves to. We are conducting a full review, effective immediately, and we are not hiding behind soft language while we do it. The general counsel, a careful man named Peter Halloway, tried once more. "Marcus, admissions like that carry legal exposure. We should soften." "Careful language," Marcus said, "is not the same thing as honest leadership. Draft it my way." Halloway stopped arguing. When the aircraft finally reached the gate, the atmosphere on board had shifted into something heavier than anger and quieter than relief. Passengers gathered their bags in near total silence, the kind of silence that happens after people have watched something they know they'll be describing for years. Diane had already deplaned in Chicago, but her absence sat in the cabin like a physical thing. A stripped jump seat, an apron nobody had refolded, a silence where her voice used to be. Captain Ashford stepped out of the cockpit one final time, hat in hand, and found Marcus waiting near the forward door. "Mr. Reed," he said, and his voice cracked slightly on the second word. "I want to say." "You don't have to say anything to me right now," Marcus said. "Say it in the review. Say it honestly, and say it fully. That's what will actually matter." "I trusted her judgment over the evidence in my hand," Ashford said anyway, quietly, like the confession had been building pressure the entire flight and finally found a crack to escape through. "I've flown for 28 years. I've never once let that happen before." "Then let this be the last time," Marcus said. "Not because I'm the chairman. Because it's the truth, and you already know it." News crews were waiting at the gate in Denver before the jet bridge had even fully connected, a detail that told Marcus everything about how far this story had already traveled while he was 35,000 feet in the air with no signal. Eleanor Voss met him at the door, along with 2 board members whose faces had the particular tightness of people who had spent the last 2 hours rehearsing damage control and were about to discover it wasn't needed. "The board is assembled," Eleanor said. "Legal is ready. Media is staged in the press room upstairs. What do you want to lead with?" Marcus looked back once at the cabin. At Maya, phone finally lowered, watching him with something that had shifted from suspicion into quiet attention. At Sophie, standing near the galley, waiting to see if the promise made at 30,000 feet would survive contact with the ground. At the empty jump seat where Diane should have been. "This begins with the passengers," he said. Then, louder, to the cabin still filing out around him. "What happened today was not your fault. But what happens after this belongs to all of us." He looked directly at Maya, If you recorded any of this, keep the full video. Don't cut it into a highlight reel for entertainment. Don't turn someone's worst morning into content. Let people see the whole truth, start to finish, or don't post it at all. Maya nodded, throat tight, and for the first time that day, she wasn't thinking about the 10,000 strangers watching through her screen. She was thinking about her mother, waiting for her at arrivals, and about what she'd tell her when she asked how the flight went. The public fallout landed exactly as hard as Marcus intended it to. Meridian Sky's statement, published 4 hours after landing, did not use the word unfortunate. It named what happened. It confirmed that a passenger, later identified publicly as the company's own chairman, a detail the press seized on immediately, had been wrongfully challenged despite complete documentation, purely on the basis of assumption. It announced an independent third-party review of the incident. It announced mandatory bias interruption training for every customer-facing employee company-wide, developed in direct consultation with staff, including a 29-year-old flight attendant from Chicago named Sophie Ward, whose name Marcus insisted be included in the credits. It announced a new boarding policy. No ticketed, ID-verified passenger could be removed from a seat without documented cause, reviewed in writing, by 2 separate crew members before escalation. They called it, without much ceremony, the Reed Standard. No vouchers, no quiet settlement, no burying the story in legal language designed to make it disappear by Friday. Diane Coleman's formal statement came 2 days later, and it was not the statement of a woman who had learned nothing. It was worse than that, and better, both at once. She admitted in writing, reviewed by her union representative, and submitted as part of the internal investigation, that she had judged Marcus Reed's presence in first class before she had a single piece of evidence to base it on, and that when the evidence contradicted her, she had chosen to trust the feeling instead of the facts. 3 separate times, in front of a cabin full of witnesses. I told myself for 14 years that my instincts were professional judgment, she wrote. What happened on that flight showed me they were something else. I don't have a clean way to say this. I was wrong, and I hurt someone, and no amount of experience I'd built up before that morning excuses it. She was not fired outright. Marcus, again, overruled 2 board members who wanted an immediate termination, arguing that a company that fires people, the instant accountability gets uncomfortable, teaches everyone else to hide their mistakes instead of owning them. But she was permanently removed from lead cabin's service. She completed a lengthy retraining program. She never worked first class again. Captain Ashford was placed on administrative leave for 6 weeks, then reassigned to a training role, mentoring newer pilots on crew resource management and de-escalation. A decision, he later said, in an internal interview, felt less like punishment and more like the only honest use he had left for what the day had taught him. Real accountability, it turned out, was not a single dramatic scene. It was slow. It was documented. It came with union meetings and formal hearings and months of uncomfortable follow-up. Nothing about it was clean, and nothing about it was fast, but it was real. 3 months later, Maya Bennett flew again, back to Denver, back to see her mother. At the gate, she watched a young agent kneel beside an elderly veteran who was confused about his boarding group, patiently walking him through it without a trace of impatience in her voice. Maya thought about seat 2A. She thought about a man telling a cabin full of strangers not to turn someone's pain into entertainment. Dignity first, he'd said, near the end, almost to himself. 6 months after the flight, Meridian Sky's internal numbers showed something that never would have made headlines on its own, but meant more than any of the viral coverage ever had. Escalation complaints down. Resolution rates up. Not perfect, not overnight, but measurably, steadily better. Marcus Reed never once called himself a hero in any interview he gave about it, and he gave very few. When a reporter finally asked him directly what he wanted people to take from the story, he thought about it for a long moment before answering. "Power is only worth anything," he said, "when you use it for the person in the room who doesn't have any." That was the real ending. Not the viral clip, not the headline, not even the policy with his name on it. Just a man who kept his seat, a company that was forced to look honestly at itself, and a handful of people. A junior flight attendant, a passenger with a shaking phone, a captain who finally told the truth out loud, who learned in the hardest possible way that respect was never supposed to be a privilege reserved for the front of the cabin. It was supposed to be the minimum for everyone, every single time. And somewhere, on some other flight, someone watching this story unfold might remember it the next time they feel that same quiet, dangerous instinct rising in their chest. The one that judges a person before it has a single fact to stand on. And choose, this time, to ask a question instead of making an accusation. That choice, more than any policy ever could, is where real change actually begins.